Testing.
Can you hear us okay, Dr. Clay? Oh, fantastic. And go ahead, say something to make sure we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, loud and clear. Thank you so
Ah,
much.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Then I will go ahead and call our meeting to order at 9:02 and ask Director Ross to take the roll for us.
Dr. Kaur,
Present.
Vice President Haley,
Present.
Superintendent Horn.
Here.
Member Katniss is not with us today. Member Clark is not with us. Dr. Clay,
Here.
Dr. Hagerman,
Here.
Member Kravickas is not with us today. Member Meyerson, Dr. Robbins, not with us today. Member Tovar, Dr. Kaur, you have a quorum.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Then I'll move us along. No real president's report other than to thank those who have chosen to spend some time with us this morning during this meeting. Always appreciate your presence and comments. And just a reminder for our friend and colleague, Dr. Clay, when we take our votes, remember to keep your camera on and unmute so we can see and hear you during votes. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Superintendent Ross, for your report. I'm sorry. You have not been elected superintendent of instruction, have you? Have I just started a political controversy? I hope not. That would be Superintendent Horn for his report and then Director Ross.
Oh, okay. Well, it's been an active morning, actually. At 8 o'clock, we started a meeting of a very large statewide committee to deal with the fentanyl problem. And I was very grateful so many people were willing to give their time and effort. We have 5 deaths per day in Arizona to fentanyl overdose. That's 5 deaths today, 5 deaths tomorrow, and so on. It's 1,800 a year, which is what we had last year. And it's a very serious problem. And we want to be sure Narcan is in our schools. Right now, it's not, but 2 doses of Narcan will save the life of somebody who had an overdose. So the committee is working on the law requires the school districts to have policies, but it doesn't require them to have Narcan. We're working on some standard policies that they can adopt if they want to. Working on a way to fund the Narcan, although it's for the 2 doses, it's $40. So if we can't fund it, certainly the schools can afford it. And we think it's absolutely vital. It's a tragedy to think 1,800 people dying every year of overdoses. In many cases, not their fault because they didn't choose to take fentanyl. It was contained in something else without them knowing about it. But I am happy that we have a large contingent of people from various groups participating in our committee. The other thing I was going to mention is the terrible, in my opinion, terrible thing of students. I forget what the word is, but looking at their cell phones and moving the thing up and down when a teacher's trying to teach them. I can't imagine anybody scrolling, people scrolling on their cell phones while the teacher's trying to teach them. I can't imagine why anybody would permit that. Los Angeles School District just passed a law prohibiting it. We have some districts in Arizona prohibited, but many have not. We got a bill passed in the legislature to require the districts to adopt policies prohibiting it. But there can be exceptions, like when parents need to have an emergency that they call for, or when there's an educational use. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it, and so I'm hoping people will contact the governor and we can pass it next year. I just can't imagine why anybody thinks it's okay for students to scroll on their cell phones when someone's trying to teach them.
Thank you, Superintendent Horn. Now we'll move on to Executive Director Ross, who always has the pleasure of bringing some amazing students to us. So please, Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, I'm especially excited today because as we do every June, we honor Arizona recipients of the Presidential Scholar Award. This is an award that was created in 1964, and it's given to outstanding graduating students. Scholars are determined through review of essays, school evaluation, transcripts, and a demonstrated commitment to leadership and community service. There were 161 scholars named in 24 nationwide, 3 of whom came from Arizona. We have 2 of those students with us today. The third student was not able to make it today. We will honor that student in August. In addition to having those students with us, each of the student named an influential teacher or person educator who had a role in their education. We have that person with us today as well, which is really exciting. So up first, we're going to hear from 2 of those students is going to be Vivian Saavedra. She's a recent graduate from Chaparral High School, president of Chaparral's Math and Literacy Club, and scored a 1590 on the SAT. So Vivian, why don't you come on up?
Good morning. As you all heard, my name is Vivian Saavedra. I'm 17 years old, and I did recently graduate from Chaparral High School in Paradise Valley this past May. I had the pleasure of attending Chaparral all 4 years of high school, where I truly found my place among my peers with the support of my teachers and my guidance counselor. At Chaparral, I found that what you put into your experience is what you'll get out of it. There are so many amazing opportunities, and all you have to do is ask. I met my best friends there, and I'm so grateful to have been a part of that community with them. I met some of the best and most hardworking teachers there as well, who've been a defining pillar of my academic journey. I also have such an amazing family who truly support me and believe in whatever I choose to do. And having such a strong community inspired me to do my best in all of my pursuits, specifically with academics, which I think were a significant reason I was chosen to be a 2024 U.S. Presidential Scholar. I was the president of the math club at Chaparral, chosen as the outstanding senior in the math department, and a very active member in the Science Olympiad Club. So as you can see, I'm a little bit of a nerd. That being said, I think the most important factor that led me to receiving the award is just having like genuine interest. Being interested in like what you truly love is really just what inspires you to keep on going. So I'm going to Arizona State University at Barrett the Honors College in the fall, and I'm excited to be studying mechanical engineering. And I hope to get both my bachelor's and my master's. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much for your time and for the privilege to speak in front of you today. Thank you.
Okay. So we're gonna include photos. No, right. And Vivian had named Miss Sadie Purner, her chemistry teacher from Chaparral High School, as her most influential teacher. Ms. Purner is not with us today, but we want to make sure we acknowledge her.
One, two, three. A little bit.
Hey, you want to?
Your family can go in?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You guys can come in as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
All right, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Our next student is Mateo Hewish. He's a recent graduate from Basis Mesa. He's co-founded 2 not-for-profits, Brothers and Sisters Serving Others, and Students Supporting Brain Tumor Research, and will be working with Stanford diabetes researchers coming soon. So Mateo, come and join us, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you all for letting me be here. And thank you to Shannon Etz for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm honored to be a presidential scholar. I want to share a few moments briefly with you throughout the years. But before I do that, there's a few people here who I need to thank because I would not be here today without them. First, I want to thank my principal, Mr. Lester over here. He's just been totally there for me all the time. And I wouldn't be here without him. And then my brother, my dad at home, and then my mom is here. She's been the guiding factor in almost everything I've done. So thank you all. Love you. And then Mr. Thorson, as well as my teacher. He couldn't be here today, but thank you to him as well. So I want to share 3 quick moments. 1 about inflatable cow costumes, 2 about genetics, and 3 about nonprofits. So the first one, 9 months ago, my friend approached me and said, "Hey, I have this great idea. We should go to Chick-fil-A dressed up in inflatable cow costumes." I thought, wow, this kid is crazy. And then he said, "We'll have a great time because we won't care what people think." This started a Milky Ways group chat, which led to inflatable cows walking through haunted houses, eating at restaurants, running around malls, seeing movies, and purchasing milk. Those who saw us smiled, laughed, and sometimes even wanted photos. But after a few herd outings, I began to understand that most people just wanted that confidence and breaking through the wall of insecurity that many teenagers face today. Secondly, genetics. While preparing for genetic engineering research on diabetes for Stanford, it was already completed. I'm not going to Stanford, but they will be published soon. I became very frustrated through this process. Rather than providing me direct answers, my mentor encouraged me to pursue the answer independently. I asked her for an answer, and then she gave me the smallest hint possible to guide me in the direction. I did not like this, but pursuing this answer created a much deeper understanding than just her giving me the correct answer to the question. And this enabled me to genetically engineer generations of fruit flies and co-write the 2023 Harvard Summer School CRISPR manual with a few other peers. Because of this deep understanding I got from pursuing the answer individually. And lastly, nonprofits. I've been blessed to be able to run 2 nonprofits in high school. And the beginning of that journey began with a friend asking me and my brother for help from a single mother who had to choose between paying rent or paying her chemo bills. So we threw a yard sale and helped them eventually save their home from eviction. And then, wouldn't you know it, several other families reached out struggling with other crippling medical bills. And then we did another fundraiser, and it just spiraled into what it is today, which is called Brothers and Sisters Serving Others, where we have now thrown massive fundraisers like video game tournaments, color runs, carnivals, and dances. So now you may be asking, what do all 3 of these have in common? And the answer to that, I would say, is the pursuit of understanding. Trying to understand what people thought while I was in that cow costume led me to realize that turning on confidence attracts others and enables these fun adventures that couldn't happen otherwise. Secondly, the painstaking understanding of genetics and CRISPR science led to amazing research that hopefully could contribute to helping millions. And then third, in trying to understand the struggles of my community around me with friends and families, I was able to help buoy and inspire hundreds of families. So looking ahead, I'm eager to continue this pursuit through serving a 2-year mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Toronto, Canada, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ in the Persian language. Then after that, I will study biology, genetics, and public policy at Georgetown University in an attempt to contribute to brain tumor research. Thank you once again for this recognition. And I hope the upcoming students and teachers of Arizona can cultivate a culture of the quest for understanding over simply giving the easy answers. Because trying to understand the world and the people around you will create unprecedented opportunities. Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, that concludes the Executive Director's report.
Fantastic. Always the best part each month. So I'll move us on to item 2, which is the call to the public. And this is the time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or the consent portion of the agenda. Executive Director Ross, do we have anyone who wants to chat with us?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn. Up first will be Shelby Young, followed by Nicole Marquez, and then Marcus Garcia.
Fantastic. And I would ask each of our speakers to limit their comments to 2 minutes.
Do we have Shelby Young with us? Does not look like it. So Jessica, is Nicole Marquez joined online?
Executive Director Ross, Nicole Marquez, Marcus Garcia, and Audrielle Flonesbeck have not joined the meeting.
Okay, Dr. Core, then at this point, we do not have any speakers for this call to the public.
Okay, fantastic. If any of those folks join us, Jessica, just let us know, and I'd be able to slide them into the next call to the public if in fact they join us. So with that, I'll move us on to item 3, which is the consent agenda. And we have items 3A through 3M. Do any of my colleagues want any of these items removed for consideration individually? Hearing none, and then I will entertain a motion. Do I have a motion to approve items 3A through 3M as presented? Do I have such a motion? Vice President Haley
And I'll second.
and Dr. Hagerman as a second. Any discussion? No? Then all in favor of approving the consent agenda item as presented, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, passes unanimously. I will move us on to item 4, which is again called to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on today's items for the general session. Once again, I'll ask speakers to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Director Ross, do we have folks who would like to chat with us during this section?
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up first, we have Trevor Stokes, followed by David Borofsky, and then Coco Lovejoy.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Perfect.
There we
Yep,
go.
very good.
Again, good morning,
Good morning.
Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Trevor Stokes. I'm a education policy and strategy consultant. I work across the country, specifically with CTE departments. My firm helps local districts complete their comprehensive local needs assessments. But I office from here in Arizona. Arizona is my home. This is where I chair the Arizona CTE Quality Commission, a body charged by state law with approving with industry representation and input all of the instructional frameworks in our CTE programming. So while it's counterintuitive to me to kind of tout my own bona fides like that, I did want to establish that I'm not just speaking as a stakeholder, but also as a subject matter expert. And I am asking this board to consider approval of the CTE state plan, which will be presented by Colette Chapman a little later in this meeting. I have worked with state level projects in 6 different states, including current projects in New Mexico and Massachusetts, where we are working to rewrite every single one of their instructional frameworks. So I'm not just speaking from the perspective of one system when I say that this plan is solid and that it enables the engagement, the innovation, and the community outreach that we want from our CTE department without locking in specific strategies that the staff must execute. This plan will fill the potholes, it will smooth the road, and it will enable Colette's team, including Kevin Imes and her staff, to do the kind of community outreach, industry engagement, and other activities that make our CTE department so robust and contribute to the competitive nature of our workforce that we have to compete in a 21st century economy. Funding for our community colleges has increased 34% over the time that this plan has been in effect. It is not just the share, the split of Perkins funding that should be considered. We should really look at the total dollars being allocated. And for that reason, I urge you to accept and approve this plan that Colette will be presenting later. Thank you so much.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have David Borofsky, followed by Coco Lovejoy.
Good morning. President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, everybody in the room and on Zoom. My name is David Borofsky, and I'm the Executive Director of AC4, the Association of Community College Coordinating Council, the Arizona Community College Coordinating Council. I'm here this morning to talk to you about the Perkins Plan as well. In a continual meeting with the Department of Education, AC4 asked for a better split of the Perkins funds that flow to Arizona. The current split is 82% and 18%, 44th in the nation out of 50 states. We were told the split would remain the same. Our concern is that 7% of the money is returned to the state every year and has been returned for a number of years, according to the Department of Ed. We've been advocating for a 75-25% split. We recognize that that is not congenial with our K-12 partners, and make no mistake, they are our partners. What we are asking for is some of that 7% to be given to the community colleges. The current funding landscape for education in Arizona hurts us all, secondary and post-secondary. It presents particular challenges for the community colleges as we are the workforce and economic drivers of this great state. With only 18% of the necessary funding being allocated to us, we face constraints to respond to business and industry, students, and being able to buy necessary equipment, technology, and support services. We appreciate that the State Board of Education is in the position to accept or reject the proposed Perkins Plan presented to you today by the Arizona Department of Education. Given that the funding formula presented today is the same as the last plan you reviewed, I am requesting that the State Board of Education vote no on this Perkins Plan and send it back to the ADE for review and submittal and resubmittal, and we at AC4 stand ready to help with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Coco Lovejoy, followed by Rebecca Robinson, and then Julie Batt.
Hi. I have a little thing here, so bear with me. Dear President, members of the board, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I will go by parent CB. I'm going to talk on the meeting item 5H. And I'm here to address the way in which we were tormented by the Arizona Department of Education and by John Ward as representative of the department. This issue has affected my family profoundly and highlights a broader problem with the ADE's practices. On June 7, 2023, we entered into an ESA contract with ADE. In October and November of the same year, I submitted receipts for reimbursements for associated goods. They were educational goods necessary for my children's development. ESA approved associated goods for 2 of my students via direct purchase using the ClassWallet platform. For my 3rd students, for which we had to purchase out of pocket, ADE denied the request for reimbursement, but after an appeal and further review, they approved the reimbursement and sent us the funds directly into our bank account in January 2024. However, on March 22, 2024, the ESA reversed their decision, suspended all my children's accounts, which are 3 students, and demanded repayment for all the 3 students. This inconsistency is not only unfair, but also a sign of gross mismanagement. My children's educational tools were approved by ADE specialists, validated through the ClassWallet system, and even recommended by an occupational therapist for their kinesthetic learning needs. To have these decisions overturned months later without clear communication and especially proper justification undermines the reliability of the ESA program. The ADE's actions demonstrate a lack of transparency and accountability. By approving the same expenses so many times by so many specialists and then retroactively denying them, They create an environment of uncertainty and distress for families relying on these funds for their children's education. This inconsistency not only disrupts our children's learning, but also destroys the trust in the system. Can I please finish?
Very quickly, yeah, make
Furthermore,
your final points.
Locking me out of the class wallet accounts without us having done anything wrong at any point is not only impractical, but punitive. It is unreasonable to expect parents to memorize purchase number orders. Anyway, I urge the State Board of Education to carefully go through the hearings officer recommendations to approve our appeals and reject the ADE's denial of these purchases. Thank you,
Thank you.
State Board of Education, for your hard work overseeing the ESA program with love and grace. Thank you for your time. God bless.
Thank you.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Rebecca Robinson. And then Jessica, has anybody from the first call to the public joined us? No? Okay, so up next, we have Rebecca Robinson.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Robinson, and I'm the Career and Technical Education Director for the Tombstone Unified School District. I've been in the education field for 18 years and in this position for the last 6 years. As the CTE Director, I am responsible for the management of our district's Perkins 5 and priority grants. I'd like to speak to the importance of these Perkins 5 funding allocations, more specifically how those funds have helped create a culture centered around CTE at Tombstone High School. The current allocation of our Perkins 5 grant funds has helped me as the director be able to provide essential financial support to our programs, teachers, and students. In a school of approximately 470 students, we require students to complete at least one CTE program as a graduation requirement. Many students complete 2 or more programs, taking advantage of our block schedule. Our total CTE enrollment during this last school year exceeded 800 students. Not only do we have excellent enrollment and completion rate in CTE, but we also offer 10 diverse programs to our students based on the needs of our students, the families, and our community. Our school board understands the financial burden many of our families face, and they have established a maximum $1 fee per student per year for every extracurricular or co-curricular activity offered by our school. That means for each of our 10 CTE programs, we will not pass on any costs to families. All required CTSO memberships, CTSO leadership and competitive events, industry credentials, equipment, supplies, etc., are covered financially by the district through our grant funding and CTED funds. If the allocation of Perkins 5 funds were to be decreased in the slightest, it would greatly impact the level of support I can provide for the teachers and students at Tombstone High School. I'm blessed to have a team of dedicated CTE teachers who are eager to participate in yearly professional development, largely funded through Perkins. The quality of our CTE programs has not only been noticed by our surrounding community through the waiting list of families trying to get their students enrolled at Tombstone High School, but also through the Arizona Educational Foundation. Tombstone High School recently earned the prestigious A+ School of Excellence designation, largely based on our, quote, robust CTE programs, providing students with valuable skills and practical knowledge that prepare them for future endeavors, end quote. As the only school in Cochise County to receive this honor, we take great pride in our CTE programs and the role they play in setting us apart as a school of excellence. If we were to see a reduction in Perkins funding, this would place a great burden on our school in continuing this excellence. It's my highest
Fantastic. Thank you.
may attest to the value of our Perkins funding. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Corr, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Thank you so much. Then I will move us on to the general session, item 5. This is the presentation and discussion of the K-12 generative artificial intelligence guidance released by the Arizona Institute for Education and the Economy. Super interesting and super timely. And Director Ross.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we're very excited to have this presentation with us today. With us today is Dr. Chad Guestson, the Executive Director of the Arizona Institute for Education and the Economy. And with us virtually is Leanne Lindsay, who's their Director of Educational Technology and Innovation. Chad?
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us.
Excellent. Superintendent Horn, Dr. Corr, State Board of Ed, and those watching. As Sean said, I'm Chad Gueston, founder of the Arizona Institute for Education and the Economy, and online is Leanne Lindsay, Director of Ed Tech and Innovation with the Institute. Leanne's a nationally recognized ed techer, and she happens to be out of state at an ed tech convening. So today we're here to talk about artificial intelligence in K-12. In preparing for today with Sean, we thought it was important to share just a little bit briefly about the Institute and our work since we are new to Arizona. You can go to the next slide. There we go. instead of, when I sent this to Sean a couple of weeks ago, instead of reading the slide, I just wanted to share a couple of things very clearly about the Institute. In many ways, we're founded upon the reality that what we're doing right now largely is not working for Arizona's children. And we're not making progress. And we track that progress. We have pockets of success. But the reality is we're not one person or one program or one pathway away from solving our challenges, that Arizona needs really bold solutions on the system and at the intersection of pre-K-12, higher ed, and workforce. In fact, we heard a little bit of that today of what are we doing to prepare children for the future economy and the future of work. And we're doing so inside of an old antiquated K-12 system. And the Institute is positioned to tackle some of these large challenges. Next slide. We launched about a year ago, and instead of hitting the ground running, we hit the ground listening, so to speak. Spent 6 months. I've had a chance to chat with a couple of you on the board. 6 months just listening and learning, meeting with education leaders, economic leaders, CEO groups, chambers of commerce, city officials, understanding the education and economic ecosystem of Arizona, and looking at that entire continuum, birth through 5 through post-workforce. Looking for where are the biggest changes, not changes where we celebrate 2% increase in literacy or graduation rate, but big, bold change in solutions along that continuum. And have started to do work in 3 areas. I could argue there are probably 10 to 20 major solution sets along that, but are starting in 3 particular areas as an institute. First is in birth through 5. The quick story that I'll tell, I was in Dallas earlier this year speaking on artificial intelligence at a small convening. And when I left the stage, went back stage to unmic, went back out, and the speakers, I did not know who was speaking after me. The speakers on the stage were a facilitated conversation between Jeb Bush and Arne Duncan. And the facilitator at some point in the conversation said, Governor Bush, you're a proud conservative. Secretary Duncan, you're a proud progressive Democrat. What do you have most in common when it comes to education? And she said, in the count of 3, give me your answer. And they had no idea the answer. And they both said, figure out birth through 5. And in Arizona, we have incredible people in early childhood, but we don't have the right coherence and alignment and investment. And the idea of starting lines is that with the lack of coherence, children are showing up to kindergarten at radically different starting lines. Some show up way ahead, some show up way behind. And the reality is that K-12 spends the next 13 years filling the gaps that showed up on the first day of kindergarten. And so more to that, more on that to come. Second, we heard a little bit about it tonight. The reality is that we know high schools need to look different today. And there's so many innovations. We hear it, we've seen in the legislature, more CTE, more dual, media literacy, financial literacy, digital literacy. And we're trying to shove all of that into a box of high school that was created over 100 years ago. And the reality is rethinking and redesigning high school has to happen in partnership between high schools, higher ed, Dr. Kaur knows this, as well as business and industry. We call that intersection H5, high school, higher ed, high wage, high demand, high skill. And we will continue to speak more publicly about the future of high school in Arizona. But today we're here to talk about artificial intelligence and give you a glimpse into what it means for Arizona's K-12 system today. Why, when we published a document, we called it a balanced perspective, because if you're all doom and gloom, you're wrong. If you're all excited, you're wrong. We need to approach artificial intelligence with the right perspective. Next slide. We did think it was important, I've got a few more slides before I turn over to Dr. Lindsay, to just give you a brief overview of AI, because everyone talks about it. Very few people step back long enough to ask themselves, what really is AI? The reality is that human beings have been pursuing artificial intelligence officially since the 1950s. And ultimately, and at the core of what artificial intelligence is it's humans' pursuit to mimic the human brain and thought patterns. Humans have wanted to artificialize the human body for generations. We artificialize limbs, we have finally artificialized organs. And now the final frontier in science when it comes to artificialization is trying to artificialize the human brain and emotion and thought patterns. So at the core, that's what artificial intelligence is. And there was massive investment in AI across the country and even globally in the 50s, the 60s, and 70s. If you read this quote, I won't read it all. This quote was from 1970 in Time magazine, where the godfather, so to speak, of artificial intelligence said that we were 3 to 8 years from being taken over by machines in 1970. You can go to the next slide. And the reality is that what happened in artificial intelligence is, if you think about, did you hear anything in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s about artificial intelligence other than military? And the answer is no. Artificial intelligence, the field, the practice, the research entered into a phase known as the AI winter. And what happened is, it wasn't that it stalled, it's just that the research, what was happening behind the scenes, was not public until the last 10 to 15 years, when we started to see things like Siri and Alexa and driving cars. And then, of course, ChatGPT came onto the scenes very publicly a year and a half ago. And here we are still talking about what to do with artificial intelligence. Next slide. What I just wanted to share really quickly is the State Board of Ed, because at some point you're going to grapple with what might this mean for the state. Everyone is talking about generative AI. We're going to talk specifically about that today, but I thought it was important just to share briefly that there are 4, so to speak, branches of AI we should be paying attention to in K-12 education. Yes, number 1 is generative AI, which we'll talk about today. Second is a branch of AI known as natural language processing. These Gen AI and NLP do ultimately work together, but as artificial intelligence tools, bots, machines begin to understand human language more effectively, more efficiently, we're going to start to see not just ways in which schools can communicate better, where superintendent can write a speech in his native tongue, instantly translate that into the 100 languages that he serves, and send it out in an instant. Can even create an avatar of himself giving that speech in multiple languages. And that can happen in an instant today, where we used to spend millions of dollars on translation services. And we're actually going to be able to streamline a lot of those processes. And NLP actually is the tool, the machine, or the branch of AI that's doing early literacy programming, like Amira, which I know has been on a state contract in Arizona. The next branch of AI is called RPA. It's probably the least exciting publicly. It's probably has the most promise inside of education. It's called robotics process automation. Right now, school systems spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars doing master scheduling, teacher duty schedules, bus schedules. We do those by hand. Robotics process automation will actually fully automate the major systems, schedules, structures that exist. It can even read your email for you, summarize your email, and send it back to the recipient if you so choose on its own. A remarkable future we should be thinking about as a state. How do we bring some of these innovations to our school systems to free up a lot of the time and energy for our educators? And then the final branch is around robotics, but AI-powered robotics. Where we think about what are the types of machines and machineries we have on our campuses today: vacuums, cameras, kitchen materials. What you're going to start to see in the future around artificial intelligence is schools that are cleaned by AI-powered robotics, sweeping, mopping, waxing, kitchens. There are kitchens and restaurants in our nation today where machines prepare your food. And in cases where we're struggling to find cafeteria workers, we might be able to find incredible efficiencies using AI-powered robotics in our schools as well. And so we thought, just to provide a quick glimpse, that AI is not just about generative AI. It is about these several branches that we should be tracking as a state as we think about the future of school and the future of learning. Next slide. So why would the Institute itself care deeply about artificial intelligence, and why, amongst all the things that we could be focused on, is it something that we decided to put effort and energy behind? You can go to the next slide. First of all, the reality is that artificial intelligence is not just impacting schools today, it's impacting the workforce in the future. And so Arizona has to be thinking about artificial intelligence in two lenses. Number one, what does it mean for teachers and children today? You heard Superintendent Horn earlier talk about the role of cell phones. We think about the role of AI today. But we also have to be thinking about what's the role of AI in 10 years and in 15 years. And therefore, how are we preparing our children for that world, not this world, for that workforce, not this workforce? We also think that AI, just like I gave you a glimpse into a couple of the branches today, that AI can be incredibly transformative to school, to learning, to the ways in which we provide content to our students. A lot of people have worried that AI was actually going to be a wedge in between adults and students. And the reality is that it can automate and streamline a lot of the menial tasks of educators today and actually provide more time and more space for teachers to interact with, mentor, coach, guide, build relationships with students if leveraged appropriately. We're also really clear that AI should not be used just to make this version of schooling feel a little better and faster, that the AI tool should actually be disruptive in good ways to help us rethink how we utilize time and people in a school system. Leanne may allude to that a little bit. We also got involved in this because we were really concerned that if we didn't do anything quickly as a state to provide some sort of guidance, that you'd see what we see on the right side, which is the challenging side of AI, the defensive side of AI, legal and ethical problems around discrimination, bias, data security, plagiarism, cheating, all the things that everybody's worried about. We need to be very clear about what we need to do to play defense, so to speak, around AI. We didn't also, as we allude up here on the slide, we also didn't just want to take this version of teaching, as I alluded to, and just make it feel faster. It's actually about rethinking curriculum competencies and allowing students to really grapple with content in radically different ways. And I think the last thing that I'll share off this slide is that what we're seeing across the country, and it's true here in Arizona, is that adoption rates, kids and teachers that are using AI versus kids and teachers that are not using AI. And the reality is more middle and upper middle class communities are using it and lower income communities aren't. And if we don't level that playing field, you're going to start to see widening gaps of opportunity, widening gaps of achievement. And so we felt it was incredibly important that we got out quickly to produce guidance so that we don't find ourselves in a year or 2 or 3 from now actually having wider gaps as the result of AI versus smaller gaps. Next slide. And so on May 13th, the Institute published statewide guidance. Teach AI, a national group, tracks the number of statewide guidance across the country. Arizona was the 12th state to have statewide guidance. We revealed the second week of May, and we'll be continuing to go around, just like I am today, go around the state over the summer and into the fall, making sure that Arizona K-12 system has their eye focused on, again, both the defense of AI, but also the possible offense and the exciting possibility that AI brings to Arizona. And with that, I am going to turn over to Dr. Leanne Lindsay, who will spend some time sharing with you some of the details about the AI guidance. Dr. Lindsay.
Greetings, Superintendent Horn and members of the board. My name is Leanne Lindsay. I am calling in from Denver today. I'm at the International Society for Technology and Education Conference. I work with Chad at the Institute. I have been in the ed tech space in Arizona for the better part of 25 years, and I led the development of the Artificial Intelligence in K-12 Education Guide for the Institute, which we know was released on May 13th. Since the release of the guide, I have been asked many times why we produced this document and what we were hoping to achieve by releasing it. And to answer that question, I'm going to ask you to think back to this time last year, summer 2023. ChatGPT had been out for about 7 months, And there was this flurry of activity and excitement, but also fear around this new technology. And it seemed like everywhere we turned, artificial intelligence was the topic of conversation in the media, in the news, in our conversations, especially in the field of education. And it's understandable why this was such a hot topic, because ChatGPT and the branch we now know as generative AI had capabilities that we had never seen before, in that generative AI creates. So it doesn't just collect, it doesn't just curate, it doesn't just search, but it actually creates text, creates images, and creates answers. And so we can understand why education leaders, not just in Arizona, but across the nation and even the world, were grappling mightily with the question about what to do with this emerging technology. They had questions like, should we ban it? Because won't kids just use this new creation tool to cheat? Won't they just copy and paste? And if that's the case, how do we mitigate this? Can we find a really good AI detector? And then after a while, the conversation slowly started changing, from can we ban this to should we embrace this? And is this technology going to be a barrier to learning or a benefit to learning? And what role does this new technology play in the future workforce? And all of these questions were top of mind for education leaders this time last year. And dare I say, kept many of them up at night. You can go to the next slide, please. So to answer the question, why AI guidance, we had a couple of really key objectives, if you could click. The first one, thank you. The first one is we wanted to offer an invitation to education leaders who were kind of sitting back and waiting to see what happened. We wanted to offer them a green light, an invitation to get off the sidelines and to signal that it is time to start thinking about AI. It's time to start talking about it, having conversations within the LEA, with other education leaders, with educators, with families. It's time to go. Number two, we wanted to offer enough information that the conversation goes beyond, but won't they cheat? That's an important question, but if we stay stuck there, we're never going to get to the other really important questions about how do we do this effectively, and what are our visions for using this tool to promote effective practices. And we're never going to get to the questions about responsible and ethical implementation. So we wanted to help move that conversation. And number three, if you'd click, thank you, was to give Arizona schools an anchor for how to think about AI, particularly in regard to the questions that I just shared with you that they were all sort of grappling with, and to give Arizona educators and leaders a common language so that as a state, we can start talking and learning together. Next slide, please. So it was very important to us, both the authors of the guidance and the Institute, to provide, and what Chad alluded to a little bit earlier, which is a balanced approach, meaning this guidance and the authors and the Institute are not zealots of this new technology, and we do not think or want other people to think that AI is going to be a magic bullet that cures all the ailments that we are experiencing in education. But nor do we approach this technology in a fear-based perspective either. That there has to be this balanced approach where we look for the possibilities and we understand the benefit that this automation can bring forth to really transforming the way we do education, and at the same time taking our responsibility really thoughtfully and carefully. So the document itself is divided into 4 main sections that you can see on the screen here. The first section is a bit of an explainer. It does a little bit of what Chad shared with us today, which is describing artificial intelligence as a whole, and then talking about generative AI as a subsection, and a really important subsection, because the document it is specific to generative AI. The guidance document is specific to generative AI. This first section really helps any reader, even if they're not too familiar with AI. It helps give them just enough information to be able to more easily digest the rest of the document. The second section is a section labeled Powerful Teaching and Learning and School and Administrative Use. And in this part, we really hoped to illuminate the possibilities, almost like we would using it as a North Star. How might this technology not perpetuate ineffective and outdated teaching practices, but how might this really be utilized to transform teaching and learning, to offer more space for human connection between teachers and students, building relationships? How can this technology streamline tasks, allow us to analyze data more consistently and more often? And how will this impact our future workforce and how we're preparing our students for the future workforce? So really seeing the possibilities. The third section is called ethical and responsible implementation. And here's where we really cover 5 key areas that all education leaders must think about in their adoption and implementation of this new technology. So those 5 key areas are, the first one is bias, that is inherently present in all AI tools because of how they are trained. The second ethical consideration is misinformation. The third is intellectual property and copyright, so ownership. That starts to get into that question of cheating, if you will. The fourth ethical consideration is data privacy, which is huge. It's such a legal implication. And while it's not hugely different from the data privacy concerns that we have with other technologies, there are some nuances to it that education leaders, especially those working directly with the technology in those positions, need to be cautious of. And then the fifth ethical consideration is equitable access. So Chad also alluded to this a bit when he talked about, there are folks who are utilizing AI. There are other groups that are not utilizing it as much. And so we as educators can sort of balance these scales and make sure that there's an equitable distribution of this information and experience. And then the last section, I'm told, is the fan favorite out there in the schools and districts that are in Arizona, and that is our implementation recommendations. And in this section, we offer a 3-phase implementation structure that starts with really building a foundation, goes into a section on building momentum and how to really leverage early adopters to build momentum, the role of professional development in strengthening AI literacy for all teachers, staff, students, and even family members and community members. And then finally goes into the 3rd phase, which is continuous improvement and making sure the things that we're doing are working the way that we intended. Next slide, please. So in February, we started the process of development of this guidance. It was a rigorous but expedited process. So we grabbed the 6 best people around Arizona that we could find, and we served as a core team. And the core team set the vision for this guidance, and they were the authors of this guidance. So the core team started off with really this national landscape review. So we really wanted to identify the trends at the national level. We reviewed the National Education Technology Plan. We talked to folks at the U.S. Department of Education, and we reviewed the other statewide AI documents that were available at the time. There were 7 of them in February that we reviewed. We talked to some of the leaders in the state departments that led those efforts as well. And then we cast a wide net with a survey to educators and education leaders in Arizona. And we asked them, what would you most like to see in an AI guidance document? And we came together, we analyzed that data, and we used that to create our first draft. Once we had a full first draft, we sent that to 18 reviewers right here in Arizona. Some of these reviewers were superintendents, they were technology directors, they were technology integration specialists, they were curriculum coaches, they were classroom teachers, and they were parents. We also sent the document to 3 national reviewers, one who is a renowned researcher in AI in education. Another reviewer is a former education executive for Dell Technologies turned AI strategist. And our third national reviewer is a board member at COSIN. We received all the feedback from our 18 Arizona reviewers and 3 national reviewers, and we used that input to make the necessary revisions. And then again, we published the document on May 13th. Next slide, please. We had incredible support from a number of organizations around Arizona. You can see ASTE was a huge support, ASA, Arizona Rural Schools Association, and GuppyMac were all behind this effort. And we worked with TeachAI, which is a national organization that's helping to lift up, support, and advocate for effective and responsible and ethical AI implementation across the US in our schools. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get to some highlights of the document. First of all, I'll mention that if you haven't yet seen the document, you can get there really easily. If you hop online and go to azk12.ai, it's going to take you to the webpage where you can download this document. If you would just click through for the bullets, that would be great. Thanks. So I just wanted to, I think there might be 2 more. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to run through a couple of really key ideas that you will see in the document. Number 1 is this idea of human oversight. So one thing we have to be really careful for when we're using this technology is that we are not putting all our eggs in the basket of the technology itself. So humans must take the responsibility for when the technology is used, how it is used, and evaluating the input that we get out. Because remember, this is a creation tool. So when it creates that text or that answer for us, we cannot assume that that answer is correct, and it really deserves and requires that human oversight piece. So you will see this theme of human oversight threaded throughout the entire document. Second of all, we reference and emphasize the Arizona academic standards in this document, particularly in the section for powerful teaching and learning. We think about AI in the classroom in 2 ways. One of them is AI literacy. How are we going to prepare our students to understand and use this technology? And the other way is, how are we going to use AI to help students grapple with and understand math and science and social studies a little bit better? And in both of those areas, we found connections to not only the computer science standards and the educational technology standards, but we found connections to the ELA standards in Arizona, the science standards, the math practices, and the social studies standards. And you'll see those connections in the document. The third point is that we advocate for AI literacy and new literacies for not only students, but an entire school community. So when I talk about new literacies, it includes AI literacy, media and information literacy, digital literacy, and digital citizenship. Next is that you'll see on the document, we invite educators and education leaders to use AI as a catalyst to really rethink teaching and learning. We invite educators to think about what academic integrity means in this new context of an AI-powered world. When we can go into AI and ask it to produce answers for us, or ask it to produce a 5-paragraph essay, what does that now mean for teaching and learning, and what we ask kids to do and why? And how can we start to rethink that in this new age of an AI-powered world? We also talk in the document, which is consistent with the national recommendation and all of the other state recommendations or guidance documents, is that we know that AI detectors are not reliable. So right now, the research is showing that AI detectors punish our English language learners at a higher rate, and students with higher AI literacy actually know how to game the system, if you will, and get past the AI detector. So we recommend in the guidance that an AI detector is never a sole source of input to determine whether a student has used it on an assignment. Finally, like we talked before about the risks, we present those risks. I already told you the 5 main categories. Here they are again. And then we already talked about the 3-phase implementation structure. Next slide, please. Since it's released, and you can just click through, I think there's 4 of them. I've been talking to folks in districts and wondering what difference or what impact this guidance has made. And a couple things that we've heard is that district administrators who were not talking about AI previously have now started at least opening these conversations, and they're talking about AI. I talked to one school district who said they already had an AI task force in their district, and they had already been heading down that path. But they said, you know, after the guidance was released, we got together, we studied the guidance, and we started looking at our plans moving forward to make sure that we had all those pieces in place. So it really shaped our thinking as a task force. I had one one education technology specialist contact me and say that their district was approached by a board member who inquired about the best strategies to provide AI literacy for the community. And there might be one more down there if you click.
Dr. Lindsay, bear with us for a second. They're having some technical difficulties with the presentation. I appreciate it.
Okay. You know what? And there's only one slide left, and I can talk through it without the slide if you'd like me to go ahead and do that. Oh yeah. Okay. This last bullet was that I had a technology specialist reach out to me and say that he, in one school district, was collaborating with someone else in a different school district, and together they were planning a professional development series, and they were using the guidance to help them create and organize their professional development for teachers. Final slide, please. Oh, I guess I don't have a final slide. You know, I just wanted to end by sharing what we have coming up next. Since the release of the guidance document, you know, we know that there's more conversations happening in districts, but we also know that there's some other work that needs to get done. So the thing that we're really excited about is that we're going to be offering a challenge to LEAs very soon, this leadership challenge. And it's called the 3 and 3 challenge. And we've identified 3 foundational tasks, or what we're calling AI must-dos, to keep LEAs on the path to safe and legal implementation. And we're challenging LEAs to complete these 3 tasks within the first 3 months of the school year. So that's the first one. We're also going to try and help districts find We heard that some districts are already out there looking for AI consultants or AI, just some folks to help them strategize and think carefully about AI. So we want to offer some support in helping them find the right people. We hope to get some other organizations together, not just the Institute, but ASTE and Guppy Mac and some other organizations who care about AI and form a community of practice to better offer some support to LEAs. We're thinking deeply about professional development as well as policy, working with ASBA and the trust to help them as they start to revise technology policy with AI in mind. And the final slide, I believe, is just a final thank you and an invitation. And if you want to get to the document, you can use that QR code and it'll take you right to the website. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lindsay. Dr. Gesson, apparently the AI bot deleted your final slide there briefly, but we recovered it. So timely, so very interesting. I know not a week goes by at my institution that we're not talking about AI and its ramifications, its possibilities, and I love that you've taken the lead. There was a slide or a quote there that one of the purposes was to give the green light to start engaging in this. So I thank you for your presentation this morning and open it up to my colleagues if they have any questions or comments for you. Vice President Haley, you look like you were.
I just had a couple questions. Thank you so much. And I'm really grateful to Executive Director Ross for scheduling this in such a timely way. Just a few questions on stakeholders. How would you recommend, or one, are there recommendations to the board to take any action? And second, when thinking about stakeholders, who are those types of individuals that we should include, recognizing it's not just a K-12, but a true continuum type issue?
Yeah, I'll give a couple of quick reactions, and then Dr. Lindsay, if you want to jump in. So one, we've been really clear through the guidance and even previous trainings that districts should have a task force, and charter systems as well should have a task force. And regardless of who's on that task force needs to be listening to and engaging with students, parents, educators, workforce. Certainly the focus of the task force has to be thinking about implementation, policy, practice, but your task force needs to be listening to the broader community, exactly to your point. This can be exciting and disruptive to business, to industry, to community. And so it's through the task force that we believe we get out to the voices of the community. I would also say, and I said this earlier, that when we think about the use of AI, we also need to be thinking about the ethical considerations and the responsible usages. And so the more that we can get that information out, parent informational sessions, student sessions on responsible use, irresponsible use, there's a lot of harm that can be done. It's part of the reason why we launched the 3 and 3 challenge, which you'll hear about very soon publicly, that there are a few places that even if you're a district that says, I don't want to do much at all, or you're a charter system that says, I don't want to do much at all, there are a few things you have to do, or else you're going to find yourself in the news later this year. And so that's a big part of the 3 and 3 challenge. And that is about really getting to all stakeholders so that they understand.
Any other comments or questions? Superintendent Horn, please.
Yes, in my communications with districts and schools, I've said, please do not trust anything you get from AI without checking, because a lot of false information comes through AI. I'm sure you know the story about what happened with lawyers. And I've asked several experts to explain how it happened, and I'd never got a good answer. So maybe you can give me a good answer, which is that lawyers started doing research on AI, and the system fabricated quotations and citations. So they would make up a quotation and they would give you, say, 300 Arizona, 200 in a year, and was all fabricated out of whole cloth. It had nothing to do with reality. And I can't understand why something would be programmed to do that sort of thing. So I give you a chance to give an answer that no one else has been able to give me.
So there actually is an answer to that, and I would, for someone that really wants to dig deep into that particular question, there are a couple of really good examples online of how ChatGPT works. And it would be really worthwhile, because the reality is what ChatGPT does is it is trained on now 1.7 trillion pages of data. And that's what it uses. It uses use cases, law cases, university research, whatever you can find on the internet. And then when you ask it a question, it actually goes word by word, predicting the best next possible usage of the next word. And so if you say, how do I teach my third grader how to read? It's actually utilizing the information. And if you've ever done ChatGPT, you notice how it goes like word by word by word by word, and then it suddenly gets fast. It's actually building upon a predictive system of what is to be said next. And so it's not always fully accurate. It's based on all the information that exists. So you can take two pieces of law that are contrary to each other or opposing each other and ask a question, and it'll draw bits and pieces. So it might draw from one law case that was from 2003, but that was just a small part of the information that it grabbed. It was grabbing information from other places. And so it is utilizing all of the information that's online, but it's actually giving predictive text analysis of what comes next.
But why would it fabricate citations that don't exist?
Yeah, Superintendent Horn and Dr. Kaur, it's not purposefully fabricating. It's actually just utilizing the information that it has to try to produce and predict the next word, the next phrase. But I think probably more important to your question, this is why it's critically important that we're teaching this to our students and to our parents. There was an administrator earlier this year that was going to be fired in another state because somebody was able to take that voice and fabricate a fake conversation in order to get that principal fired. And so, yes, we were recently at a convening where somebody reminded us that there are bad people out there trying to do bad things with this data. And so we need to teach our kids and our educators to discern the truth. Don't believe everything you read. Check multiple sites and citations before utilizing the information. But to our point earlier, Superintendent Horn, if people aren't talking about it, doing it now, we're going to find ourselves in October and in December and in February with a lot of challenges statewide if we're not actually teaching these skills and these literacies.
If I can just jump in and say one more thing, Superintendent Horn, you're exactly right. And I couldn't agree with you more, which is why one of the 3 in 3 challenges is to make sure that all educators are fully aware that the output that they get, the answers that they get from generative AI are not always accurate. Because what we're seeing nationwide is teachers who aren't yet trained, but they're very excited about using AI, is they're going rogue, and they're using AI on their own. They're signing up for free tools. They're inputting questions. They're getting answers back. They're believing that those answers are true without checking, and then they're bringing that into the classroom. We're seeing that kind of start to happen as a trend nationally. So one of our 3 in 3 challenges that we're issuing is to make sure that there's at least a little bit of training at the beginning of the school year for teachers to let them know that that human oversight piece is critical. So I just wanted to acknowledge your concern there.
Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? Again, thank you so much. I look forward to, to reference Vice President Healy's, this is for information for the board today. I suspect it will come, maybe not this board, but it will come to a board of State Board of Education at some point, because to your point, AI is not going away. It's somewhat reminiscent to 35 years ago when I started in the community college. The question was in the mathematics faculty, should they use calculators, right? Should we use AI? Absolutely. We need to do it ethically without bias and make sure that it's accessible. So again, thank you both, and look forward to continued conversations. With that, I'll move us on to item 5B. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action to approve the Arizona State Plan for Perkins 5, covering the years 2024 to 2027. Director Ross.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. With us today is Colette Chapman, Associate Superintendent from the Arizona Department of Education, to present on the Perkins 5 State Plan.
Welcome.
Thank you. President Corr, Superintendent Horn, and members. My name is Colette Chapman, and I oversee career and technical education at the department. Today, I'm here to submit the Perkins 5 plan, or to resubmit the Perkins 5 plan for the board's approval after the April 24th meeting, and noting the request from the board to contact certain key stakeholder individuals and groups for further feedback. I and members of the CTE team contacted our federal liaison for direction. His name is Adam Flynn Tablaw, and he advised against contacting specific groups of people and he provided the following instruction: that we could reopen the public comment. So we did that from May 10th to May 21st so that all stakeholders could provide public comment. Now, after the second public comment had ended, I did contact the individuals and groups that the board had wanted me to. Okay. So today our agenda is the Perkins 5, the development of the Perkins 5, industry involvement, changes made, and the funding split. So in 2018, the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, better known as Perkins 5, was signed into law. This reauthorized the Carl D. Perkins Plan of 2006. In 2019 and 2020, the Department of Education convened a group of stakeholders to develop the Perkins Plan. And that initial process was very collaborative in nature and representative of the CTE community. And then in 2024, the Arizona Perkins 5 state plan is updated as a continuation of the 2020 Perkins state plan. So what is the Perkins 5 plan? What's the purpose? The Perkins 5 plan is a federal mandate, and it's a funding mechanism for receiving federal Perkins money. This law includes specific formulas that take poverty and population into consideration. It's a set of standardized questions and required performance indicators. There are 8 for secondary and 3 for post-secondary. The format of the plan is very prescriptive in nature. It's designed to provide a broad overview of the state's efforts to meet the requirements of the Perkins 5. It's a state plan, it's the overall system, and is not intended to provide descriptive details. Once again, it's the continuation of the 2020 plan, and it was updated with significant stakeholder involvement, and it's not indicative of CTE as a whole. It's only a part of a large and complex system. Next slide. Okay. Well, before I move on to the Perkins plan, I do want to stop here and discuss industry and how we engage industry at the state level. So business and industries are the ones that develop the technical standards. And the technical standards are standards that identify the essential knowledge and skills needed to complete a CTE program. So business and industry does that. Technical skills assessment, that's linked to the technical standards, and CTE teachers who are expert in the industry assist with the development of the technical skills assessment. At ADE, we have industry representative groups that we've had for years. We've really done well in maintaining long-term relationships with these industry groups. And then, of course, we have the Arizona Quality Commission, and the membership is comprised of representatives in business and industry in in 11 career groups. The Quality Commission is the final authority to approve technical standards and technical skills. And they also, Quality Commission approves certifications that get included on the A through F school report card. And then we have Superintendent Horn's initiative, the Arizona Education Economic Commission. And that's a true public-private partnership with ADE and industries. We currently have 10 industry groups, and some of those industry groups are also reviewing the technical standards to make sure that we're up to date in an ever-changing world. Next slide. Okay. I'm going to talk about the Perkins 5 performance targets. I only have 3 slides on this because these were reviewed in January. So I'm doing the graduation, reading, and math, and that's just the ones that were most commented on. So state determined levels of performance, or SDLP, must show continuous growth that must increase each year. The SLP must be set at a minimum higher than the average of the last 2 years' actual performance. And there's a safety net that Arizona as a state and subrecipients must reach 90% of the SDLP target to be considered meeting the measure. So it's a little bit of a safety net there. Okay, next slide, please. Graduation rate. There's nothing wrong with this slide at all. I just wanted to show the graduation rate for CTE concentrators. It's at 96.03%. That is awesome. And it's indicative of all the hard work that's going on out there in the CTE community. The regular state average for graduation is 77%. So, and I'll explain the grade line then. That's our 90% threshold. So a district would only have to meet 90% of the 96%, which equals 86.45%. So that's, if they stay in that range of the grade line, then they will have been considered to meet that target. Next slide, please. As you can see here, this is reading in ELA. Arizona right now is at non-CTE. Arizona is at 40%. CTE concentrators are at 44.2%. So we're a little bit higher than the non-CTE concentrators. And then our goals, I believe, are very doable. And we want to be at 53% by 2027 and 2028. And then again, that grade line is what schools and the state need to meet in order to meet the measurement. Next slide. And here's math. We did take a dive from 2021 to 2023. We're currently at 38.5. Non-CTE actual data, or actual, is 32. So the state right now is at 32, but CTE concentrators are at 38.5. That's wonderful. Again, we want to get to the 53% mark by 27, 28. And the gray line is where the schools have to meet in order to meet the measure. There were a lot of updates to the state plan, and it was just simply putting in things that ADE was already doing, but we just wanted to beef up the plan so it shows how we support CTE. So we're continuing with the career literacy framework and resources for K-12. Collaboration with the Department of Economic Security, Apprenticeships Office. Strong involvement in the Arizona Economic Commission. We have enhanced resources for working with special populations, including students with disabilities. And then the vision, which was created by the stakeholders. And the vision is every Arizona student has a developed career pathway. So that, okay, go ahead. That's okay. I'm fine. Okay. Okay, now considerations for the 82-18 funding split. I'll give you a few seconds to read that slide and I'll go through it. I'm gonna start with the overall per pupil funding, secondary and post-secondary. In Arizona, full-time students receive $10,330 per year. In post-secondary, the average is $20,000. So there's a difference there. We considered the funding sources available to secondary and post-secondary entities. Discovered that post-secondary entities have more funding streams available to them, such as tuition through dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, and that the secondary school just don't have. And then additional secondary entities receiving Perkins funding. From 2020 to 2024, there were 19 secondary schools added. So that just decreases adds to the slices of pie that we have to cut our funding, or the secondary funding has to be cut into several different pieces. And that number could continue to grow as where we're only funding 10 post-secondary schools. Arizona did not receive a significant increase in Perkins funding as in the past. Last year, we received $1 million, and this year we received $40,000. So that was considered. And then comparison to other like states. Next slide, please. And I'm gonna just, you can take a minute to look at that. So this is a comparison to other US states with similar Perkins allocations. So as you can see, even those states that had a much higher percent going to the community colleges, those states were also funding more community colleges. Where Arizona, we fund 10 community college, 82-18. We receive more money than the splits of 55-45, 44-56, 60-40. So we thought that was important comparison to make. And then next slide, please. Here's another slide with a lot of information on. I'll let you guys look at that. So from 2020 to 2024, post-secondary in Arizona had a 33% growth, where secondary had a 14% growth. Next slide. So in summary, the Perkins State Plan is just a continuation of the excellent work that was accomplished in 2019-2020. Revisions were made to the performance measures to meet Perkins requirements and to improve how data is reported. And just a reminder that the Perkins Plan is a part of a much larger career and technical education system. Can I answer any questions?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for a more comprehensive presentation. I think we were treated to maybe 2 or 3 slides a couple of months ago. So I think this is much more comprehensive, and I appreciate that. I have a couple of questions. You indicated strong involvement by the AEEC.
Mm-hmm.
Who represents community colleges on that board?
Well, actually, I'm going to try to remember here. It was Rio Salado. Initially, it was Rio Salado and Pima College. And then a person from Yuma Western, or your college, was invited as well. And it was the intention, like in AAC, we have the industry leaders in the groups are kind of on the side. They don't come to the meetings, but that information is relayed to them. And that was the plan for community colleges as well, that these community colleges would be transferring the information to all the community colleges. That didn't work very good. So what we've done is we have invited all the community college. They will be joining us July 16th in Tucson. And so they will be meeting with all of the industry providers. And the industry providers are very excited that they're going to be meeting with all the community colleges statewide.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. So I'll wait to hear from my colleagues, but I'll share my frustration.
Okay.
We had an opportunity to comment in January, and I think some on this board had their feelings expressed at that point. Then we received the document in April that did not reflect those comments. And then we went through the motion of meeting with stakeholders, but there is a difference between meeting with and listening to.
Okay.
And we once again receive a document with no substantial differences in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
It is important that it be understood that there are three bodies that play a role in this Perkins Plan: the department, but this board, and ultimately the governor to sign. And I don't think the role of this board has been recognized in this process. I will once again vote no and urge my colleagues to do the same. Any thoughts from my colleagues? Superintendent Hagerman.
So I have 2 questions. The first with the math levels. What exactly is going to be done to move from 30s to the 50s in the performance increases? I'm trying to understand like what actions are going to be taken to increase those performance levels. Maybe I had the numbers wrong. It was like 38 to like 50 over the next, like the cycle of the grant. I'm just trying to understand how we do that. How does that happen?
So we are at 39% right now. And then please ask that question.
So to move to the goal, so we're setting this goal. I'm trying to understand like what actions the state's going to take to achieve that goal other than to set it.
Okay. Gina? I have the experts behind me. Yeah, I brought the troops. Yeah, Sam. This is Sam Irvin. He's our data person.
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, other members of the board. The state sets the performance target at a rate determined by the Perkins.
Get right in front of the microphone.
Yeah, at a rate that is prescribed by requirements in Perkins, but all actions to meet those requirements are undertaken by local recipients who receive the Perkins funds. The state's performance is just an aggregate of local performance.
So just to be explicit, so the percentage per year change, because it seemed like the math percent increased more than ELA. And so I was trying to understand Maybe-
President Corr, Superintendent Horn, other members. We initially set our ELA and math goals to align to the state's ESSA plan, which had a very aggressive 90% proficiency by 2040. And that was at 53% proficient by 2027. We aligned our goal to meet that 53% proficiency by 27. CTE concentrators were performing not as well in math as they were in ELA, so that line is a little bit more steep.
Steeper.
Yeah, than it was, but they are approaching the same target by 28
Okay.
or 27.
Yeah. So you set there's a certain target they got to get to, and because they start lower, the target's a little steeper.
Correct.
Got it.
Superintendent Horn?
Yes, I think the efforts to increase proficiency both in math and in reading and English proficiency is a department-wide effort for all students, not just CTE students. We have 16 initiatives designed to accomplish that. I have passed out a list of our 16 initiatives. We could do that again if you like, or I could send you one. But they include things like improvement teams that go out to schools that are not doing as well. Highly qualified and talented teachers and principals go out to those schools. We have a very robust training of leadership, where we have, the word has gotten around as to the quality of our leadership training, and they've been overwhelmed with requests to attend, and they've had to create many more classes than they anticipated. And after every class, they ask, would you recommend this to other leaders like principals? And so far it's 100% have said yes. We have new collections of data to help schools, so that a school at a particular economic level, say 80% free and reduced lunch, can see other schools with the same economics that have done better, and so they know where to go to get help. I don't think we have time to go over all 16, but I'll distribute that again if you like.
Okay.
Okay. And my second question relates to when you were looking at like the 10 community 10 post-secondary, has an assessment been done at like the student level? Like what's the number of students in like a satellite, like a high school participate in CTE? How many participate at a CTED level, and how many participate? So my initial feeling is because in Arizona, we function at kind of the student level of funding. I'm wondering if, maybe not right now, but in the future, we look more at like where the students actually get their services or where they do their completion, as opposed to by the number of institutions.
Member Meyerson?
That was my last one.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I think the part that I'm just still would just love a little bit more clarification on is that it seems like now, after sort of several meetings, the distribution between the allocation obviously seems to be the crux of the issue here. And to Dr. Corr's earlier point, sort of the three entities that are kind of involved in the process, the department, community colleges, and the board, it seems like two of the three are kind of like dramatically in favor of that allocation and that distribution percentage differing. And it seems to me that sort of regardless of the total allocation, especially if dollars are flowing back to the department, why we wouldn't want those dollars back in the community college system to support our students. And so I think I'm just confused as to why that continues to still be a sticking point.
Secondary schools have 27 months to spend their funding. So if if they don't spend it, it comes back around to them. We've never given money back to the federal government. So it is needed. Do you have anything else? It's not like it's not getting spent. It is. It might be getting spent in the 13th or 14th month. Oh, thank you.
Hello,
This is
the
Bobby.
board. My name is Bobby Nevis. I do a lot of the fiscal work for CTE. And the schools do have a project period, which is 15 months to reimburse their funds. But the state has a project period of 27 months. So what happens is if the school doesn't end up spending all of their allocation in that year, it comes back to the state and then we reallocate it back to them the following year as carryover. And the reason why, sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
Okay.
I've never talked in front of a board like this before, so I can. So that's the federal government created that whole process so we do not revert funds. And that way we can allocate these funds back to the schools next year. And it's the same with post-secondary as well. So that 7% is not going back to the federal government. It's going back to the schools. Sorry, I'm so nervous.
That's okay. That's good. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Clay. I see your hand up. Appreciate your patience. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. I have a couple of clarifying questions to ask, and depending on the answers, it will help me with my vote because I can't vote unless I have good information. So please be patient with me as I ask these questions. The first question has to do with industry credentials. Are industry credentials or industry certifications or credentials required or optional?
President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, I believe they are optional. They're not a requirement, but we definitely would like everyone that can to have an industry credential. Is that right? Somebody's coming up. Yeah.
President Kaur, Superintendent Horn, other members, I'd just like to clarify the answer. All CTE programs must lead to an industry credential per Arizona statute, but because credentials come at a cost to the student, they are optional for the student to pursue.
Okay, with that, another question. I'm looking at your S5S1 industry recognized credentials, and the numerator is number of CTE concentrators that graduated from high school during the reporting year, having earned an industry recognized credential. That means that's not a option. They have to do it. So that's very that can be misunderstood because for what I'm reading, when I'm looking at this, it's basically saying that in the formula, they have to do it. Okay, so I need that. I understand that it must be led to an industry validated credential. I understand that, but before the old plan, it wasn't a had to. It was different. This is written differently, which causes the schools or the field to feel a little bit uncomfortable because now you're saying that it's a have to. And when it's a have to, yes, that's when the money comes into place. When it's a have to, it also makes students who may not want the credential to do it, whereas before it was they had a choice. Now this looks like a have to.
Go ahead.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Clay, President Kaur, Superintendent, other members. The text was changed for the denominator of 5S1, our industry credential performance measure, to better align to the text of the Perkins Act itself. Perkins requires us to measure the percentage of concentrators, CTE concentrators that graduate from high school having earned an industry credential. We feel that the old definition of the old plan did not meet that text and that the new one does. We also feel that credential or industry credential attainment is perhaps one of the best indicators of a student's success after they graduate from high school, and that it has become a priority nationally and in the state, and that the change of the denominator is a shift in that direction.
Okay, so first of all, to clarify, so the question is, it was changed and they have to. That's the answer, right?
So the text was changed, but credential attainment is still optional for the student. They do not need to pay for the credential. The performance rate was set at 40% by 2028. So not all students are required to attain a credential in order for the school district to meet that measure. But the credential, the change does indicate that it is a priority that schools should pursue credentials. Some credentials come at a very low cost that schools can cover. Some are free. And again, not all students must pursue a credential.
Okay, so do you understand my concern with this? Okay, and not only that, the word that concerns me, and we're just having a robust conversation here. You say you feel. Okay, I have a problem with that word. You feel that this should happen. You feel if you were to really have that robust, synchronous conversation with the field, and I would like to be a part of that conversation too. There's still some concerns about this. Some of the current concerns, one is when you do this, you have certain companies that have monopolies on credentials. Okay, there's a lot of unintentional consequences by this that you're going to place on the schools that you're not considering. So my major thing is you put the schools up against the ropes this way because of how you felt, instead of leaving it the way it was, where students who, if they felt they were ready, they took the credentials. Because I know that all students have to take the TSA test, right? That's one thing. They all have to take that. And then with the industry credentials, you're putting them up against the ropes. So we can go back and forth. And I think that this is not the platform to have this conversation, but I have a list of things that are concerning because of that right there, and the unintended consequences. So when you go by how you feel this is the right thing. Feeling is one thing, but facts is another. And what we do with facts is we put all the facts and the feelings on the table with the stakeholders and we discuss it. And it hasn't been discussed. And this is not the right platform for the discussion. And this has come to me over and over and over again by the field, even as last week. So this is still an issue, and it's not clear. It's very gray. So I will say that it's a concern with me, and it's a concern with the field. Okay, that's one thing about basically the industry credentials. And I'm seeing that right now, the only organizations that would really benefit from this will be the credentialing organizations who are selling them to the schools. That could be a perception. See, we want to erase all those perceptions. That's why conversation is very important instead of having it here where we're having it now. That's one of my concerns. The other concern, and I'm very sorry, do you have any feedback from that? Because that was one. I have two additional ones, but that was one of them.
Okay, thank you. President Corr, Superintendent Horn, Dr. Clay. These items were discussed in stakeholder meetings. And so we had, I think, 2 or 3 large stakeholder meetings, and these were discussed. This is, I guess if this aligns with Perkins, then that's where we need to go.
Could I ask a question? Just a clarification on this point.
Yeah.
Okay, so there seems to be a question which is factual. It's not a question of opinion.
Mhm.
Are all the students required to get certification or not? So you're saying not. Is there something you can point to explain specifically why they are not required to get certification? Something in the language or something that will satisfy the members of the board that it's not required?
So kind of the opposite. Thank you for your question, Superintendent Horn, other President Corr. The formalities, I know. Kind of the opposite. There is nothing in Perkins or in state statute that says a student must get a credential in order to complete the program, graduate from high school. Nothing says that it is required. So the department isn't saying that it is required. It is a priority in Perkins. It is a priority in the state statute. And our performance measure
Okay.
change reflects
So the
that.
question is whether it's required. So a board member is saying she sees language that she thinks says it's required. We need to address that. Why is that not so?
Thank you. It is not required. I can see why the perception would be that it would be required, because we are encouraging more students to earn a credential in order for the school district to meet the performance measure. Not all students are required to earn a credential, but because of the change in priorities, we're encouraging more students to do so.
Can I ask just a quick
on this topic?
Yeah,
absolutely.
What's
Please.
the current level of performance in this area? So we want to go to 40%. Where are we now?
So we've recently, thank you for your question, Dr. Hagerman. The department did not start collecting credential attainment information until 2019. Okay, so it was kind of a rough start as a learning curve as districts begin to report that information. In 2021, I'm just going to give a history. We were at 19% attainment rate of graduating concentrators. That jumped to 29% in 22, and then to 34% in 23. That line continues very gradually over the next 4 years, 35, 36, 38, and then 40% by 2028. And again, with that 90% threshold, we're very confident that schools will continue to meet that measure, even going, exceeding the measure, because credential attainment is such an important thing for students. I'd like to go back and address a comment from Dr. Clay, if I could. Students, and this is just a conversation, nothing personal. The industry credentialing companies will not be the greatest benefactor from this. It will be the students. All of our industry credentials go through a rigorous process, are vetted and recommended and approved by business and industry as being the necessary credential for a student to gain employment in that industry. So even if they do come at a cost, even if they are monopolized by one company or a series of companies, it's because those are the credentials that matter to that business and industry. And those are the credentials that our students will earn.
Dr. Clay, you had a couple other questions or concerns. The floor is yours.
I did. And this is why it is so important for us to have these conversations prior. Because I understand what you're saying, and Superintendent Horn, thank you so much for trying to help me clarify. I am torn because I'm looking at the document here. Okay. And documents should not be open to a bunch of interpretations. And that's my concern. Okay. And there is still too much gray. First you say yes, then you say no, then you say maybe. Okay. I'm looking at the formula. Okay. I'm looking at the formula right here. And the formula says have to. You're using the numbers from the have to. All right. That's so that is saying, without it being written, what has to be done, because you have a formula here. And if the schools cannot attain this, then they're not going to be able to attain it. Okay. And then we're going to have a lot of things we are going to have to deal with, those unintended consequences. Let's get this stuff fixed now. That's my concern with that. It's just too gray from the rural schools to the bigger schools. It's very gray. And that bothers me. The other thing is that I'd like to talk about, or just to ask the question about, are still the proficiency. And this is just, I can't understand how we can correlate what the state is doing with what CTE does and hold CTE responsible for this, how our ELA, our science, and our math scores as far as proficiency. Here we go, and what I'm looking at, and I'm taking a 50,000-foot view here. I'm looking at the state can't even obtain those numbers. Yes, CTE is doing well in some of those numbers, but you're asking the CTE community to do something that they are not personally responsible for. They are not, as far as the math and the science, the ELA, you have to work with those teachers. And the thing is, CTE teachers should not be held responsible for those at the same level as the science teachers, et cetera, or those ELAs when they can't do it themselves. And my thing is also, I understand that the way we should do it, the way we're doing it historically, was just to take the average of the last 2 or 3 years. And that would have made it maybe a 0.25 jump, maybe a 0.5 or 0.7, but you're talking about a 2 to 4% jump here. Okay, and here we go. Why? And I've heard the why, but I'm very uncomfortable with the why. All right, so why are CTE teachers held accountable for academic performance that they cannot control at the level that the state, at the level of what the state is saying for the core subjects? It should be the way it was historically. And I don't see a reason for that. I've heard your reason. And the reason what I've heard was to keep the standard up. Well, standard is already up. But if if we continue to beat them down and say that they're not meeting the standard, how are we going to keep our CT teachers? You can get beat down but so much, and you're just going to go away. This
Dr.
is
Clay,
almost untenable. Thank you, and that's all I have.
Would you care to respond, Superintendent Collette?
I was just going to suggest maybe you can draw a clear distinction between what comes from the state and what comes from the federal government in these kinds of questions.
Okay. What comes from the state is a ESSA target. Okay, so we have that. And then we have current performance of CTE students. So we have a line there. And then we have what? Our proposed targets. And right now, those proposed targets, we've lowered from the ESSA targets and have given student or English, ELA, reading, and math another year to hit 53%. So we have tried to work there, but I think it's so important that all of our CTE students are held at the same standard or higher, that if we have lower standards for our students, I just can't think of why we would do that. You're talking, and it looks like here that these students here would clearly make it up to the 56%.
But doesn't the federal government have requirements that you can't go below a certain number? I think in your explanation, you were saying we're taking the average.
Right,
and
yeah,
minimum
yes.
Explain that.
Oh, okay. So, not looking at any slide here. So let's say that Arizona has a 30% and a 30% the last 2 years in reading and reading. So we take an average of that, which is 30%. We cannot go below 30%. We have to go above 30%.
Yes, I do understand that. That's the average. So my concern was, why didn't we take the average like we normally did, historically did? Just take the average of the last 2 or 3 years, and that wasn't happening. It looked like you just went ahead and jumped and said that it was the same. Am I confused?
It was the average. of the last 2 years?
Thank you for your question, Dr. Clay. When the 2019-2020 Perkins Plan stakeholder group convened, we did not have historical data to set a performance minimum per Perkins 5. So a estimate was taken and 0.25 percentage point increases were given over the course of 4 years. We do now have data available. We are exceeding the performance minimum, which would be at, just looking at the graph here, around 40% for ELA. We just had to be above that 40% in 2025. We did exceed it because of our alignment to the state goals.
Okay. All right, thank you. My last statement is, I wish that we would have been able to really have robust conversation, synchronous conversation about this. There's still a lot of gray. It just like the last question about credentialing, et cetera, et cetera. There is still so much that's not understood, and you're trying to clear it up. But when I look at the document, it's not in writing. And it's confusing to me, it's confusing to the field, it's confusing to the constituents who are asking me a lot of questions about this now, especially when I'm trying to tell them to go here, and I'm even getting questions from not even the field, but people from Fort Huachuca, you know, the parents there, they're asking me questions now because this has become a really big thing. So it's just really gray right now. And I wish that we would have had better conversation about it. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Clay. Anyone else with any comments? I'm going to ask Executive Director Ross. The Perkins Plan was due to the feds in May. Obviously, we have already missed that deadline. And we do have a couple of options before us today. And because it's super important, we all understand what we're going to vote on. So to bring that clarity, I'm going to ask Executive Director Ross to kind of run us through what options exist for the board.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So we had a conversation with our federal CTE rep, as Colette had mentioned, and who helped to clarify sort of the paths ahead for the board. One option, so I'll call it option one, would be to approve the plan as presented by the department, which would approve it for 2024 to 2027. Option two would be to reject the plan as presented, which would require the plan to be revised. However, it would impact funding for the state for FY25. Option three, per our federal contacts, state that the Department of Education could submit a budget for FY25, and then the state developed performance levels for FY25 that would meet the federal criteria for funding for the state for FY25. And then the department would be able to revise the remainder of the plan and actually the budget and SDLPs and come back before the board before next May for a vote for a plan for FY26 and moving forward. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I was just going to say a little bit simpler. We could, the board has option to approve this, the one I just presented, or the second option is go with the 2020 plan, and that 2020 plan would have new performance indicators updated. Yeah. For 1 year.
Superintendent Horn?
I just wanted to clarify when Sean said it would have funding impacts. What you mean is the schools would not get the money July 1st that they're expecting if we did not approve either of the other two options.
Right.
Superintendent Horn, Dr. Corr, members of the board, that is what we've been told by our federal contacts.
Any other questions about
Yes.
Representative Tovar, please?
President Corr, just a clarification in regards to if they don't receive it on July 1st, when is the anticipated date of when they could receive it?
Superintendent Horn, members of the board, Member Tovar, If the plan were rejected outright, it would then be contingent upon when the plan was then approved.
Okay.
So it would impact the funding for FY25 until that plan was approved. Or as is option 3, until a budget and state determined performance levels were submitted. So again, just to reiterate, there's an option to approve it through 27. So the plan is presented, an option to reject it, which would impact funding, and then an option to have the department submit a budget and the state determined performance levels for FY25 only. And then the department would have time to revise the plan, come back before the board, and then that would be for adoption moving forward. So sort of a 3-year, no, or rejected, or 1 year.
Thank you.
And again, I will obviously just speak for myself. No one wants funding, not to get to the schools, especially since we do not have a meeting in July. The very earliest we could possibly act on this is the very end of August. That would impact the start of school. So obviously anyone can make any motion, but I think we all want to remove option 2 from even a conversation. So then really, if we all kind of agree with that, we have 2 options.
So I'll make the motion for the option 3 for the 1-year approval, so we can continue to work and get an adjusted plan in place by next May.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Maybe a roll call vote just for the sake of clarity. Executive Director Ross, making sure no comments from anyone.
Dr. Kaur, prior to the roll call vote, could you just read the motion as written? That way the specificity is in there.
I will do exactly that. Do I have a motion to instruct ADE to submit the budget and state determined performance levels for FY25 and revise the Perkins plan to bring back to the board for approval for FY26? Do I have such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I second.
Thank you. Perfect.
President Kaur?
Yes.
Vice President Haley?
Yes.
Superintendent Horn?
Yes.
Dr. Clay?
Yes, but may I make a comment, please?
Please, go ahead.
I want to thank Superintendent Horn and his staff for being so patient and being meticulous and detailed and trying to get this done. So I really appreciate this. My vote is yes.
Dr. Hagerman?
Yes.
Member Meyerson?
Yes.
Member Tovar?
Yes.
Dr. Kaur, the motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the robust conversation from my colleagues. We'll knock out a couple of more quick before a break. If that works with everyone, I'll move us on to 5C. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2-811 seizure management training. Executive Director Ross.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, this item will be addressed by our Policy Director, Rico Llanes.
Fantastic. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little short. I can't see you. I can't see you guys over
We
there.
gotcha.
Good afternoon, President Kaur, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Here to present an update and closure recommendation for seizure management trainings. This is to conform to some legislation passed in 2022 that mandated specific school staff and nurses complete board-approved training. We adopted training from the Epilepsy Foundation, and the department came back to us and recommended some rule changes to address some administration assistance that conform to compliance timelines, proof of trainings, and then resource publication. We have recommended that the final draft of rule is closed today.
Fantastic. Any questions or comments for Rico? Do I have a motion that the board adopt the submitted draft and close rulemaking for procedures on AAC R7-2-811? Do I have such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Oh, Dr. Hagerman by just a nose.
Second.
Very good. Member Tovar. Any further conversations? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. I'll move us on to 5D, presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking on procedures AAC R7 2-608 and R7-2609, elementary and early education certificates. I believe this is also Director of Policy Rico to walk us through it. Go ahead.
Yes. So for these two rule packages, we work them through our certification advisory committee at the board. They are for the standard professional elementary certificate and the early childhood certificates to align to legislation passed a few years back, just to align some outdated language, make some conforming changes and address conflicting language that shouldn't have been there. It also aligns to science of reading requirements, corrects rule language for subject knowledge assessment waivers, and then lastly, harmonizes the early childhood certificates with our other state or professional certs.
Fantastic. Any questions or comments? Then do I have a motion that the board adopt the submitted drafts and close rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2608 and R7-2609? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
We'll
get there. We'll get there. That's okay. I'll do a second. Thank you.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Also for Director of Policy, Yanez will present the presentation, discussion, and possible action to close rulemaking procedures on AAC R7-2320 State Seal of Civics Literacy. Please.
All right. Thank you. So this is the last package that we have today. So this is for the Seal of Civics Literacy. The rule package was developed in collaboration with the Department of Education. I think Hannah Rood is here as well. So she was a huge component of getting this draft here today. I was probably a very difficult person to work with during ledge session, so I really appreciate her for hanging in there with me. The goal of this change in rule is to just align the rigor of this diploma seal with other comparable ones that are offered through the department. It reduces the community service requirement from 75 hours to 30 hours, and then classifies it as civic engagement hours just to broaden the category a little bit. That's largely what the changes are.
Fantastic. Any questions or discussion? No, then get ready, Member Tovar. Do I have a motion that the board adopt and the submitted draft and close rulemaking procedures for AAC R7-2320?
So moved.
Nicely done. Do I have a second? Member Meyerson, thank you. Any other further conversation or clarification? No. Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Then with the consent of my colleagues, we'll take maybe a short break at this time until 11:30. Appreciate the patience of those who are still here to chat with us, and we'll come back in 14 minutes and reconvene at 11:30. Thank you. All right, thank you so much. And we've regathered. Do we need, are we recording? We're good to go? Okay, thank you so much. A note for the board and those watching online, item 5F has been removed. The parties involved were able to come to consensus, and that has been removed from today's agenda. With that, I'll move us on to 5G, which is presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the recommendation to deny the parent and or guardian BO's appeal and adopt the Arizona Department of Education, the department's denial of a purchase in the Empowerment Scholarship Account ESA for appeal case number 2024-00018. We have two of these. And I'm going to ask Director Ross to let us know, again, it's super important we know what we're voting on. I'll ask Executive Director Ross to inform the board or walk through what options exist for each of these next two items.
Dr. Corr, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, as is the case with any recommendation from a hearing officer, be it for ESA, certification appeal, a discipline, the board has multiple options, but in particular, there are three primary in the cases of these next two items. One would be to uphold the recommendation of the hearing officer, whatever it may be. It's different in the two items. The other would be the board does have the authority to overturn the recommendation of the hearing officer. Or third, the board has the authority to send the item back to a hearing officer for rehearing. So again, uphold, overturn, or send it back for a new hearing.
Thank you so much. So again, on the current item 5G, do I have a recommendation to uphold the recommendation from the hearing officer and deny the parent guardian appeal for case 2024-00018? Do I have such a motion?
So move.
Superintendent Horn, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Hagerman, any conversation or discussion from my colleagues? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Moving us on to 5H. This is presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the recommendation to approve the parent guardian appeal and reject the Arizona Department of Education denial of a purchase in the Empowerment Scholarship Account for appeal case numbers 2024-00025, 2024-00026, and 2024-0027. So again, we have a number of options here. I think we've had a lot of materials presented to the board, and I would entertain a motion of any of the three options that we have available.
President
Dr. Hagerman.
Sean, help out with the language, but I'd like to propose that it be sent back for a rehearing.
I can propose some language here as we seek a second to that. That would be, as I understand, Executive Director Ross's kind of options, option 2, which is do I have a motion that the board send back appeals number 2024-2025, 2024-0026, 2024-0027 back to a hearing officer to be reheard? Is that the nature of your motion?
That is my motion.
Thank you so much. Do I have a second? Member Meyerson, thank you so much. Any conversation or discussion in that regard? Hearing, we have a motion that's been seconded and hearing no conversation, I'll seek a vote on that. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you so much. Passes unanimously. I'll move us on to 5I. presentation and discussion regarding legislative affairs. The board may take action to support, oppose, or remain neutral on specific legislative proposals. So we've had a very active legislative session. I know that has kept Director of Policy Yanez quite busy in recent months. So I'll turn it over to Executive Director Ross to direct this as he sees fit.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, our policy director, Rico Yanez, will be giving a sort of state of the session presentation to you all. So Rico.
Please.
All right. Good morning still, President Kaur, Vice President Haley, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Today I'll be just providing a little bit of a longer update than I had in the past, as our session ended as of June 15th, actually. And then the governor signed the budget on June 18th. So over the course of session, just a brief breakdown, 1,600 bills were introduced, 226 bills were signed into law, 31 measures and resolutions were sent directly to the Secretary of State, and the general effective date for this upcoming year will be September 14th, 2024. So just a brief budget overview on some of the highlights here. So the budget as signed on June 18th was $16.1 billion. We had to make up for about a $1.3 billion shortfall. And for the upcoming fiscal year, the free and reduced price lunch group B-weight and the district additional assistance ongoing increases were moved over to one time. So they were still funded for this year. And we also have a waiver of the aggregate expenditure limit for this upcoming fiscal year as well. And then in the K-12 education bill, there were increases with formula spending and inflation. There were caps to the STO contributions at $135 million. There were some ESA provisions that related to regulation on fingerprints, discipline that involves board discipline, but not anything staff or board members would be involved in, some auditing compliance with the Auditor General's office, and then enrollment. And there also was a permanent statute change that removes the kindergarten entry assessment tool. So of the bills passed that we will be working on at the board, first of which we have already discussed, but just to kind of re-highlight, 2645, the Foster Children High School Transfer Bill, required the board to adopt guidelines or a substantive policy statement to help school districts and charters in adopting transfer policy for partial credit and full credit of transfers for best educational placement determinations. Staff is currently working on that right now. And then there is 1457. This is an online instruction bill that was signed, I think, on Friday. So this would require that the next time our contract comes up for assessments, that the Department of Education include a provision in the RFP process that allows for virtual remote assessments for AOIs. This would be implemented the year after the funding is allocated, so that there needs to be sufficient funding ahead of going out and changing those provisions. There are also exemptions for our high school assessments for the ACT. There are exemptions for EL tests, and then also exemptions for alternate tests. So those were the big ones. So right now it's looking like the next time that sufficient funding is available, we would be going out for our AZ-SCI or what would be replacing that, and then also our elementary assessment as well. We also have SB 1560. This was our bill that board staff had proposed with our investigative unit. It permits disciplinary action on prospective employees, just to kind of move that timeline forward, so we can ensure the safety of students and the security of the school, and also allows us to adjudicate reciprocal discipline for teachers or non-certificated staff that would be coming from out of state to Arizona, and they would have to finish their discipline in the jurisdiction they're coming from. And then also we have the Holocaust Education Bill. So this is 2779. There actually was some recent legislation a couple years back that touched on this. So we actually have it in board rule, but it changes the instructional requirements to be taught on 3 class periods on 2 separate occasions between grades 7 through 12. And then we also have a Holocaust Education Study Committee. Nothing that staff is working on for this currently, but I wanted to update members because it's establishing a study committee for the Holocaust and other genocides. And it will consist of the superintendent or their designee, as well as 2 state board members here that are appointed by the president of the Senate. And then I have a brief breakdown of timeline. So upcoming in August around our retreat time, we will be, staff will be presenting drafts and opening rulemaking procedures for non-certificated discipline and Holocaust instruction revisions, just to make a minor change there, just to conform to the new statutory change. And then we also will be presenting a draft that is separate. It's not part of the rulemaking process. It probably will be part of the substantive policy statement process for foster child guidance for board review. And it will follow the same 3-month kind of time frame that our rulemaking process would. And then we also will be beginning our discussion on our upcoming fiscal year priorities. In September, we'll just have updates on all those pieces. And then in November and December, we'll be adopting our legislative priorities and hopefully closing the rulemaking and guidance. So this is just kind of a second timeline just for just legislative session to cover it ahead of our August meeting at the retreat. So in August, that'll be our first touch point for the 2025 legislative priorities. If any members have questions or would like to reach out ahead of time, feel free to contact me and I would love to help you out. In September and October, we will be engaging with stakeholders, researching any issues that were brought up in August to bring back to the board for potential legislative proposals. In December, we will be adopting the final legislative agenda. It says December 4th, but that was the format from the last year, so I apologize. I'm unsure if it will be the 4th this year. It won't. Yeah. Okay, there we go. It's the 9th. We'll revise that. And then for the 2024 session or the 2025 session, it'll begin on January 13th. So the 13th was updated. So that'll be the 13th of 2025. And then same format as last year, 6 weeks of hearing bills and committees. So the January and February will be booked there. We'll have a week of crossover. And then around the late February, March time, we'll be hearing bills in opposite chambers and kind of follow the same format as this year. All right. And then I'm here for questions or feedback on anything that was discussed just now. I know I've kind of shuffled through a lot right there, but just really quick, I also wanted to just provide just a huge thank you to all of board staff, to Sean, to the department. I probably harassed their staff so much this session and met with them so many times with so many different bills. But everyone has been so amazing during my first session at the legislature. The K-12 stakeholders have been awesome. And I couldn't have done it without just every single one of those critical pieces of support. So I'm truly so thankful for you guys.
Oh, fantastic. And thank you for your presentation. I believe Vice President Haley has a question.
So just a quick question. We have several subcommittees right now. We have one on special education and one on K-3 literacy. And if as those committees wrap up and there are recommendations that pertain to either policy, legislative priorities, how will those be incorporated into this plan?
Do you want to take that, Sean? Okay. They would be pursued in the same line that these are. And on the same level. So if there were rulemaking recommendations that were brought forward to the board, we would address them in the same time frame. I just only included what came out of this legislative session, but it doesn't affect any of the other ongoing work that we may have.
Any other questions? Dr. Hagerman, please.
Just a quick, the feedback from the field was also super positive of working with you, Rico. So we want to thank you for representing us so well.
Thank you so much.
Very nice. Any other thoughts or questions? All right, hearing Executive Director Ross, please.
Sorry, I just want to say very quickly, the conditions with which Rico was thrust into this position were unique. We lost Deputy Wonders the first day of session.
Yeah.
Though he is still a big part of our work. And Rico stepped up in a huge way and just, from board leadership, we could not be more thankful or proud of his hard work. And we know the board's legislative priorities are in great hands.
Well said. I echo those sentiments from this board. So thank you, Rico. Appreciate that. And I will move us on to item 6. This is the call, once again, call of the public. Time for the public to comment on certification enforcement actions on the consent agenda. Once again, I will ask speakers to limit their conversation to 2 minutes. Director Ross, have we received any requests to speak during this call to the public?
Dr. Kors, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. We have 2 speakers. The first one is actually a speaker who was not able to join for the first call to the public. So we have Darren Hookham. So that would have been the first call to the public. So Darren can come up. And then we have Vayida Sidney.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, and esteemed members of the board. We are here before you to ask for accountability and cooperation in establishing a parental bill of rights. Children need to know they are safe coming forward with any allegations. They shouldn't have to worry about the rules, regulations, or even the eventual retaliation for demanding their civil rights be recognized. Our children must rely on trust alone when asking Chandler Unified to weigh its own reputation against making the decent and lawful decision. Here is how they weighed us. In February of 2021, multiple young girls came forward and told Chandler Unified officials of sexual misconduct. They told an assistant principal that their teacher had been repeatedly touching them in an unwelcome manner. The school then documented the sexual exploitation of multiple minors occurring over a period of months, and they did not report. We've since learned that the law clearly states the district's responsibility was to report those allegations to this body for a lawful and impartial investigation. They did not. Instead, they stalled requests for information and scheduled their own internal meeting. We were not invited. It took place without our knowledge or consent, and the attendees were 4 adult administrators and our child. Again, she could not be dissuaded from the truth. Again, she told her story. Again, they victimized her, and then they documented, he touches my legs weekly, he does it to everyone, and still they did not report. They put the teacher back in the classroom where the harassment continued until more victims came forward. They failed to report those allegations as well. They accepted a resignation in lieu of an investigation. They made mandatory reporting optional. We have confidence that you will hold them accountable for choosing their own reputation over the safety and well-being of our children. But because we are not the first victims of their egregious activity or even an isolated incident, we ask that you work with community leaders to create a parental bill of rights. Thank you. And with your permission, I would like to leave the parental bill of rights with you.
Please do. And thank you for being brave and coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next, we have Vayida Sidney, and then we had another speaker from the first call to the public who was able to join us, Adriel Faunus-Beck.
Good morning. My name is Vayida Sidney. I am from the Hopi tribe. I live on the Hopi reservation. I'm from the village of Kekotsmobi. I have been working at Keams Canyon Elementary School for the past 4.5 years as a paraprofessional. And within that time, because we all know that we have a shortage of teachers. So I've been in the classroom teaching lessons in our classroom. And I have, for the past year, been trying to get a teacher certification. I only have a bachelor's degree. I've never gone and gotten a degree in elementary ed. So I'm asking for to get a certification. And what is hindering it is that in the past, I think I counted 27 years ago, I had a aggravated assault charge, and that has been a part of my life. I carry that with me all the time. I had to learn to let it go. And I pray for the Sergeant Lloyd Bays often. I find him in my prayers, and just that he's well and doing good. And well, bring it forward. I have had a better experience working in the school, working with children. I had to tell myself not going to do any I live a healthy life. That's what I'm doing. And it's within the school system that I got better. So I'm asking board members if you could please look at my certification, and hopefully this helps you to see who I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Actually, our next speaker dropped off, so that concludes this call to the public.
Okay, thank you. So then I will move us on to item 7 on our agenda. This is the consent agenda for certification and enforcement actions. As always, if any of my colleagues would like any of these cases pulled, that's perfectly acceptable. Not hearing that's the case, I would like for a single motion for all enforcement actions. So with that said, do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A21, 7C1, 7D1, 7D2, 7E1, 7F1, and 7F2? Do I have such a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Executive Director Ross, I did something wrong.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, you inadvertently skipped 7B1.
I would very much like to include 7B1 in that motion. Thank you, Executive Director Ross. No need for me to go through that again, right? I'm looking for a motion to accept the consent agenda items for enforcement actions as presented. Do I have such a motion? Member Tovar, do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Hagerman, thank you. Any conversation, discussion? All right. Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Fantastic. Passes as presented. It brings us to our final call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items on the general session portion of enforcement actions. And as is the case for all call to the public, I ask that speakers limit their comments to 2 minutes. Executive Director Ross, have we received any requests to chat with us?
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, we do have 2 requests. Up first is Taylor Sisemski, followed by Audra Betzer.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Sisemski, attorney on behalf of Jacqueline Johnson. I don't have any comments at this time, but I am available to answer any questions that the board may have regarding Ms. Johnson's matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. Up next is Audra Betzer.
Okay, well,
Perfect. Yep.
good morning. I'm Audra Betzer, and I'm here on behalf of requesting a reduced sentence that was recommended by the PPAC. I hope I got that right. It was recommended that my teaching certificate be revoked. Now, I'd also like to comment that at the time I did not know nor was aware of, although I did ask, call, and try to see what was going on, that I could have a attorney or even bring evidence of action to help present who I am to that hearing. So I do feel like it was unfairly recommended. I'd also like to point out that the board was split half and half initially. Anyway, it's recommended that my teaching certificate be revoked. This happened because of an event that happened in August. It was a domestic violence incident. I was not charged, although I was arrested at the time because that is what happens, I guess, when two parties are involved. And I was fingerprinted. Now the charges were dropped against me. They were put against my partner at the time. My son and I were listed as victims of this case. And it was said to be self-defense. But because of that, I still lost my certificate. I faced many other consequences from this personal situation. It was the worst night of my life. And I've done everything I possibly can to amend these consequences that I've been facing. I also sent supporting documents. I moved here last year, so a lot of my stuff is in storage, but I did have some pictures and framed letters from students that I did submit to go along with this to display what type of teacher I am. Not only that, I'm highly educated in STEM, sciences, and math, which I know are really needed, but I can work magic in a classroom with high school students. I'm an easy teacher. I didn't realize I only had 2 minutes, but
Good, take it. Finish your thoughts.
I just really want you guys to know that I'm a passionate teacher. I'm very good at what I do. This one event that happened in my life that was personal, I'd also like to amend, it did not affect my teaching at all. I just don't feel like it should revoke my teaching certificate.
Thank you.
Now, even if it needs to be proven, just even a suspension I would take, but to revoke it completely, I just feel like is an unacceptable consequence for what happened in my life.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Question?
Thank you for hearing me.
Yes.
Superintendent Horn.
What's the recommendation before us on this case?
Revocation
Is revocation.
Total revocation.
I would think we want.
Well, this is call to the public, so hold on, we can pull
Okay.
this from,
Right.
yeah,
I'm done.
thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, that concludes this call to the public.
Okay, fantastic. So that will move us on to agenda item 9. As been our process, we're able to take these as a single motion. But am I hearing from Superintendent Horn that you wish to pull an item here?
Yes, because I thought that was a pretty persuasive presentation. I don't know if Sean wants to present anything explaining why what happened, but I think it might make sense to pull it and postpone it so we could get more information, more discussion.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, joining us is our Director of Enforcement Actions, Garnett Burns, to speak to a little bit more detail about the case.
Please go ahead, Garnett.
President Core, Superintendent Horn, I was not prepared. I wasn't aware that Ms. Betzer was going to speak today. I can tell you my recollection of the case and the discussion between the members. Their concern and the reason for revocation was the recentness of the incident, also the alcohol use. There hasn't been much time elapsed since then, and she has a history of alcohol abuse and incidents. And that is, to the best of my recollection, the reason for that recommendation. If you would like to review the other cases, I can actually take some time to go back and review the packet and maybe have more information for you by the end of the meeting.
Well, I think this is basically the end of the meeting, but I would think it might be a good idea to maybe postpone that one matter so we can get more information and reconsider it. Could I just ask, the alcohol, did that involve the school at all? Or was that just when she had a fight with her?
It did not involve the school. It was just an incident. There was a stabbing involved of her significant other in front of her child. That was another consideration. The child was there for the incident. And so that was very concerning for the PPAC members.
Well, she said the court treated her as the victim.
On one hand, they did. There was 2 victims. It really was not clear. There was not transparency in the hearing. So, they read the police report. The testimony they got from Ms. Betzer didn't match that. it was very conflicting throughout the whole hearing.
Yeah, I'd like to have us ask if we can postpone this one and get more information on it.
So thank you, Superintendent Horn. So again, I'll turn to you, Executive Director Ross. As has been the case in earlier agenda items, we have options here. And once again, just for clarity, I'll ask that you walk us through those.
Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board. So the board does have two clear options before them. You can take all of the items in consent, or you would first want to seek a vote on Superintendent Horn's pulling of item 2, tabling of item 2 is how I'm interpreting it. So the first vote would be to table item B2 until the next board meeting in order to get more information. If that passes, then that item will be tabled. You could take the rest in consent. If it does not pass, then you could vote to take the whole as consent.
Superintendent Horn, that meets with the intent of your.
Yes. And if you need a motion, I'll go ahead and make it.
Please do.
Yeah, I move that we remove that from the agenda and take it up at the next meeting.
Do I have a second? And just, okay, and Dr. Clay. So we have a motion and a second to remove item B2 from taking these as a single motion. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by, and again, the motion is to remove it and have it reconsidered at a later time. Okay, just so we're all clear on, okay, thank you. Motion second, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So now I would seek a motion, unless there's other items we want removed, I would seek a motion that would approve items 9A1 through 9A9 and 9B1 and 9B3 through 9B14, basically excluding B2. Do I have such a motion? Member Tovar, do I have a second?
Second.
Vice President Haley. Any conversation or discussion regarding those items? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries unanimously, which brings us to everyone's favorite item on the agenda, which is the summary of current events, future meeting dates, and items for future agendas. We will have our usual July hiatus and return in August for our regular meeting on the 26th, followed by the board retreat the following day, the 27th. Executive Director Ross, any words about those 2 days, or?
Just Dr. Core, Superintendent Horn, members of the board, just a reminder that will be held here.
Yeah, absolutely. Right here in our usual meeting spot. Thank you so much. Anything else from go to the board from my colleagues? Hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting at 12:05 and wish everyone well. Thank you.
Well done.